Now, I can prove James Dean's accident was not an accident with just a few facts and a few minutes. And you have to bear with me a little bit because you have to zoom out and look at things, in the past and put them into perspective. Now, one important clue is James Dean writing Little Bastard on his car. That was something that, viewing it in context of what Hollywood was trying to portray back then, that was not the image that they wanted their actors to go around, putting out in the public, So, um, writing Little Bastard on your car and using it as a race car was exactly the opposite of what they wanted. And zooming out from that a little further, Donald Turnipseed and Winton Dean. And I believe Winton Dean was in on this. Winton Dean had a television interview before James Dean died, and he never had, he would never do another interview again. Donald Turnipseed only had one interview, and that was with the local newspaper right after the accident, and he would never speak again. Those are the two people that we know were involved, or we're pretty sure involved, that didn't end up getting murdered. Well, and Bill Hickman. Bill Hickman, before the accident, he had been in, not in movies, but he'd helped with movies, but nothing credited. Now, after the accident, he started getting a lot more roles in the movie business. So he had been in it for a while, and I think he was around 35 in 1955. So, from then on, his career just went up. But back to Donald Turnipseed. This involves science, and it's psychological and human nature. Now, Rolf Weatherwich, who was in on it to a certain degree, he ended up getting murdered, or they say he committed suicide by driving his Honda Civic into a brick wall in Germany. He was German, living in Germany. Now, he was known to be an alcoholic, and they say he was drunk and suicidal or something like that. But this is just 2 weeks after he agreed to come on a talk show or some sort of news program and do an interview about the accident. Now, Rolf's wife, his third wife, divorced him because she thought that Rolf and his crew, his friends, or the circle that was involved, killed James Dean. Now, a woman just doesn't make a wild accusation that her husband killed the most famous movie star in the world with no evidence, or that's odd. And she divorced him, and how she came to that conclusion is a mystery. But since Rolf was a alcoholic, he had probably been drunk and mouthed off about it. So, in contrast, Turnipseed, this is where the psychology comes in, is he would have been offered a huge contract to talk about the accident. And money being a prime motivator of people, and he'd already been absolved any wrongdoing. They just said it was an accident. Um, so it just does not make any sense whatsoever that he would decline an interview about, you know, even 30 years, 40 years later, he still would have been, given a large sum of money just for one interview. But he refused, always. And that was probably part of the contract of getting rid of James Dean is you can never speak about it. You get, your one say and this is what you say, and you don't do any interviews, you don't talk about it to people, and Turnip Seed never would. So psychologically, um, that's not how people's brains work. When you're in some sort of an accident like that, you need to talk about it. That's how it heals over. You don't bury it um, unless you have a very good reason to. Which, um, if you look at all the people who died who could have an inkling about what actually happened, starting with Rolf. Well, prior to him was Gig Young, who they say also was uh, mentally ill and shot his wife and then himself. But that happened in a Manhattan hotel room, so with no witnesses. And, back then, um, you know, the people accepting money for bribes was very prevalent. I mean, you look at now today, all the lobbyists in Washington, all of the corruption that's going on at the highest levels of government, whether it's legal or socially acceptable or within the rules, doesn't really matter. If a lobbyist for a company is um, whining and dining a congressman or being involved with the political decision making, that's swaying things in their favor, which I think is, reprehensible. But all that aside, those people would have, Donald Turnipseed would have wanted to speak about it just for the money, if not to get it off his chest. I mean, if he had absolutely done nothing wrong and um, there would be no reason for him to not speak about it. If he had done something wrong, there would be a definite reason to never talk about it. That's plain and simple. Psychologically, he did it, and he was paid to do it. Um, and the whole thing all along the way seems to have been a setup. Um, Starting right after East of Eden movie, um, when Jack Warner kind of decided James Dean was, you know, going to ruin his company or something like that. Um, and then all of the events leading up to his crash. And I've been over them before, but um, Dennis Stock's photos, nobody's ever followed around an unknown actor and clicked candid photos of them and then had them published in Life magazine, after the death. Um, no, no unknown actor has ever had that happen to him. In fact, I don't think any unknown person, has ever um, really had anything close to that happen to them. Meaning, the photographs were pre-planned as a way to profit off of James Dean after he passed. And then the corporate merging. Warner Brothers bought Time, and it became Time Warner. Time Warner is now owned by the Blackstone group, but it's this, which is also owned. They also own Ancestry DNA. So all along the way, there's been these convergence of people, companies, and I'm calling it into question because it all comes back to him actually having a child. They knew he had a son, and James Dean having a little bastard was not the image that Hollywood was trying to play. And ever since then, they've been trying to cover it up. And I could go on and on about and over the same facts, but everyone on one side of it died in very strange ways. Gig Young, Rolf Weatherwich, and then Natalie Wood in 1981. She was found washed up off the shores of Catalina Island off California there, not too far. And the police reports said she had bruises and scratches on her legs, inconsistent with just somebody falling off a boat in the middle of the night. They said she'd been drinking and slipped and fell off the boat. But there's been a new book where a guy examines all of the evidence, and he's saying that Natalie Wood's death was not an accident and very suspicious, and he's calling for justice for Natalie Wood. Now, I'm calling for justice for James Dean in the form of me getting some sort of compensation for what they've done. They've if you think about what happened after James Dean died and them burying the whole James Dean had a kid, the little bastard story, all of the things that have happened to me since then have been a result of that. And I'm not saying I've had a poor life or a bad time, but that area of my life that could be open to me is shut just because of what they've done. And if you think about contracts, like say Michael Jordan, they didn't know Michael Jordan was, they thought he was going to be a great player, but they were willing to risk a big investment in him, even though, he could have been hurt early in his career or, not been as good as he was. But you know who's more famous than Michael Jordan? James Dean. And I'm not trying to use James Dean's name as, or in effect saying that I'm James Dean, but because he was my grandfather, that connection between he and I is something that would be a large draw to audiences around the world, worth a lot of money. And I'm not gonna, sign a contract that isn't lucrative. And if I can't sign a contract that is lucrative, I'll go back to the story of the little red hen and I will do it myself.